Week 4, Project 1, Part 1, Reading 6.1, Evolving an Outline, and 6.2, Checklist. 6.1, Evolving an Outline. Now that you have your outline, it will serve as the foundation from which your paper will be constructed. Because your outline was built on the assignment expectations, you don't have to worry that your literacy narrative will fail to fulfill the requirements. Not unlike the other steps in a writing process, the act of developing an outline benefits from standard and best practices, but also requires you to develop your own approach within the structure. Factors such as genre, audience, and assignment impact the process as well. Consider and review your outline before diving in and beginning the work of building out your literacy narrative. Think about the literacy events you selected and connected. Are they the best options? Are they in the best order? Is the connection that creates the thesis clear? Once you feel confident with this structure, shift into the details. You picked the literacy events because you thought they worked together to tell a compelling story about the impact of reading and writing on your development as a reader and a writer and a person. Think through each part of the story and consider which elements are important for your reader to know in order for the connection to be clear. Then think of which additional elements help make the story a better story. Here is where you get to be creative and practice applying the elements of storytelling. What response do you want to provoke in your audiences? Are there any funny bits you can include? Are there moving moments you want your reader to slow down and feel? Are there interesting details that will engage your reader? Do any specific elements move across the literacy events? Remember the dining table and the dorm room that served as examples of elements that connect the story and created a thread in outlining the literacy narrative. How can you add some icing like that to your cupcakes? Is there an item or a sound or a smell or a person that can create a connection or serve as a symbol? If an example will help, try to think of a story that you have read or watched that uses an item or image or idea to connect separate events. Or how about a comedy routine or play that came full circle back around to where it started by using something as a thread? Perhaps your story is more serious. If so, what moves and choices can you make to invest your audience in the outcome, which is the development of you as the main character? Think of moving stories you have read and consider what made you feel invested. Now think of what you know about your audiences and how you can tell your story in a way that appeals to them. Are there other characters? Should your reader like them or not, and why? What do you show or tell to let your reader in on the important pieces of information? Is there any context or exposition your audience needs to know to get to the main events? Once you have taken some time to think about the outline and consider ways to add emotion and playfulness and drama and bliss, dive into the work of construction. Sometimes it isn't until you are mid-construction that you see how to highlight a thread or accent a point. In general, the main points in source material that populate the outline will serve as the bones, and the thesis that leads the outline will serve as the backbone. One great way to begin is by building out the individual stories associated with each literacy event. Be sure to mention the texts that define the literacy aspect within the literacy event and consider how much of the story of the text needs to be shared. If you don't quote the source directly and only reference the text, you don't need to add an in-text citation or a works cited page, but a single phrase is suggested whenever sources are introduced. Once you have the story developed, connect the events. The concrete connections are the transitions that lead the reader from paragraph to paragraph without confusion and with purposeful progression. The content connections are the threads that tie the events to each other and to you and your development. Once the stories are connected into an extended story, create a conclusion and an introduction in order to make both the concrete connection of starting and ending your narrative with your thesis and the content connection of bringing your reader full circle in the story of your development as a character. As your literacy narrative takes shape and develops from an outline to a story, the thesis may need to be clarified and some elements may be added or deleted. But these adjustments can be made without fear that you will stray too far or run out of time and leave out major elements because you started with foundational elements. Be aware, however, to avoid overwriting, which can result in 1,500 words that you have to edit down to fit the assignment. Discussing your relationship with literacy and describing the impact can feel like a lot to fit into only 750 to 1,000 words. Revision also takes place within construction as you build stories in sections and paragraphs and read for each for revision. But just like you needed a finished outline before you could sit with the structure and look for places to add creativity, you need the completed literacy narrative before you can move into the formal process of revision. Starting with a carefully constructed outline and intentionally developing it will allow the revision process to focus on advancing and polishing a solid submission into a spectacular submission instead of having to rewrite just to make the paper fit the assignment or to catch all the sentence level and formatting errors and spend time making those corrections. Assignment 6.1. Develop your outline into your literacy narrative. There is no submission related to this assignment, but it is important to take the time to construct your literacy narrative. Reading 6.2 Checklist. Once you complete the initial construction of your literacy narrative, you will shift into the process of revising your narrative to prepare for submission. The first step in moving your paper toward its final state is to run through a basic checklist to make sure the general expectations of the assignment have been fulfilled. Before self-review, as part of the general process of constructing your paper, you will check your paper for basic expectations of university-level writing and for the specific requirements of the assignment. When you have a general checklist, you can reverse engineer the checklist so that the elements you will check for as part of your revision are included as part of the construction process, which can save considerable time and energy. Some students like to print their papers and read them carefully for the items on the checklist, and other students simply read through the paper in Word or Docs and check for major expectations. Here are some major elements to look for and at when checking university-level papers. First, page formatting. In MLA, top left should have name, instructor, course, and date. Margins, 1 inch. Pagination. Insert page number top right, type last name, then space before the number. Spacing, double. Font, Arial 12, Times New Roman 12, or instructor preference. Title, centered, not bold or underlined, no extra line after it. Signal phrases. MLA, present tense verb and author last name when new source introduced, an appropriate verb to introduce all subsequent material from that source. See the link in the reading above. In-text citations. Formatted correctly for quoted or paraphrased sourced material. Paragraph indentions. Standard tab, no extra space between paragraphs. Reference page. In MLA, that's works cited, title, separate page, alpha order, any other basics of the assignment. Checklist items are generally basic elements that can be reviewed without a close reading of the content. Items on your checklist may vary based on assignment and format, and the assignment details always add extra elements to the list. Also remember that your instructor is one of your main audiences, so be sure to include any specific directions and expectations from your instructor. As you review your narrative and make modifications, note questions you have or elements you need to clarify. Any source you locate to support your review can be used for assignment 7.1. If you have reviewed your paper for the items on the checklist, your self-review will allow you to focus on improving the quality of your content. Assignment 6.2. Read the sample checklist and tailor your checklist for the literacy narrative by adding any specific items to your list based on the assignment expectations. After reviewing your literacy narrative for the items on your checklist, note at least 3 adjustments you made to your paper. This is the end of reading 6.1 and 6.2.